Thanksgiving at my parents' place had always followed the same routine. The scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon-spiced pumpkin pie filled the air. Laughter echoed through the apartment, and my parents, Evelyn and Robert, along with my two younger siblings, Samantha, Sam, and Chris, were all too eager to update me on their lives. Well, mostly on what they had spent money on that month. For 3 years, I'd been giving them $4,000 every single month. At first, they never asked, I just wanted to help. I was doing well financially, and making their lives easier felt like the right thing to do. My dad was able to cut back on work. My mom quit her part-time job, and my siblings had zero worries about tuition or bills. It felt good to be useful, but over time, gratitude turned into expectation. Instead of appreciation, all I heard were complaints about how expensive life had become. Sam and Chris casually mentioned the newest gadgets they wanted. My parents hinted that the apartment rent was getting harder to manage, and slowly my monthly support became less of a gift and more of an unspoken obligation. This Thanksgiving was no different. At first, everything seemed normal small talk, eating, pretending we were the picture-perfect family. Ryan, my husband, sat beside me, his expression unreadable. He hadn't said much all evening, but I knew he had thoughts strong ones about how much money I had been pouring into my family. And then, just as I took a sip of wine, my mother dropped the bombshell. Lisa, sweetheart, with inflation and everything, we were thinking, maybe you could send just a little more next month. Nothing too crazy. Just an extra $1,000 or $2,000. It would help so much, right guys? Sam and Chris nodded enthusiastically, grinning like they had just hit the jackpot. Oh yeah, Chris chimed in. I've been looking at this insane new gaming PC top-tier specs. Would be great for schoolwork, Sam added. I've been thinking about getting a car. Nothing fancy, just something reliable. I bit my lip, trying to stay calm. They were all so sure I would say yes. They had no doubt I'd keep footing the bill, as if it was my duty. Ryan, sitting beside me, gently squeezed my knee under the table. It was subtle, but I knew exactly what he meant. Enough. I put down my fork, took a slow breath, and said the words I never thought I'd have to say. I can't do that. Silence. I swallowed, my voice firm but calm. Actually, I need to cut back. Things are tight with the baby coming, and I can't keep giving you $4,000 a month. Starting next month, it's going down to $2,000. Dead silence. The smile on my mother's face vanished. My dad stopped chewing. Sam and Chris exchanged wide-eyed looks like I had just said something insane. Then Chris was the first to react. Wait, what? You're cutting it in half? He looked offended, like I had just slapped him. I nodded. I'm sorry, but Ryan and I have to think about our future. $4,000 is a lot of money. We just can't afford to keep doing this anymore. My mom let out a dramatic sigh, placing a hand on her chest. Lisa, you know how hard we work to keep this home running. And your siblings, they're so young. How can they focus on their future when they're constantly stressed about money? They're 18 and 20, I pointed out, my patience wearing thin. They can get part-time jobs. I'm not saying they need to pay for everything, but they should at least contribute. Chris crossed his arms, his face twisting in irritation. You don't get it. Jobs suck. School is exhausting. It's hard to find motivation when there's no clear path forward. Sam nodded. Yeah, what do you expect me to do? Work at a fast food place? That's so not me. I felt my stomach churn. Was this really how they saw things? Then, my dad spoke up, pointing his fork at me. You've always been the responsible one, Lisa. The one we could count on. And now, you're just cutting us off? What are we supposed to do? Work harder? His words stung. I had spent years helping them, not because I had to, but because I wanted to, because I loved them. But in this moment, it was painfully clear my love had turned into a transaction. And the second I refused to pay, I wasn't family anymore. Ryan reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. His expression was calm, but I knew he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. When my dad finally spoke again, his voice was cold and final. If you can't support your family, Lisa, then you might as well leave. I felt my heart drop into my stomach. I glanced at Ryan. He didn't even hesitate. He simply stood up, pulled out my chair, and said, "Come on, we're leaving." And just like that, we walked out. We didn't even touch dessert. The drive home was silent, not the peaceful kind of silence, but the kind that sat heavy in the air, pressing down on my chest like a weight. I kept my hands clenched on the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white. Ryan sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, his face unreadable. I should have felt angry, maybe even relieved. Instead, I just felt empty. After years of bending over backward for my family, one night of saying no had been enough to make me the enemy. They didn't just disagree with my decision, they threw me out. Ryan didn't say anything at first. He was letting me process. That was one of the things I loved about him. He always gave me space when I needed it. But as soon as we walked through the door of our apartment, the silence finally cracked. "Are you okay?" I let out a bitter laugh, tossing my coat onto the couch. "No, not even close," Ryan exhaled, rubbing his face before walking over and sitting beside me. His expression was calm, but his eyes were full of something else, something deeper, frustration, sadness, maybe even anger, but not at me. I rested my elbows on my knees, dropping my head into my hands. "I feel like I failed them, Ryan. Like, all this time I thought I was helping, but the second I stop, it's like none of it mattered." Ryan reached out, his hand warm on my back. "Lisa, you didn't fail them. They failed you." I looked up, frowning. "They're my family." His lips pressed into a thin line. "That doesn't mean they're entitled to use you." I opened my mouth to argue, but the words never came, because deep down, I knew he was right. Ryan sighed, shaking his head. "I kept quiet about this for a long time because I knew how much you love them. But, Lisa, they don't see you as a person anymore. To them, you're just a paycheck. And the moment you put up a boundary, they threw you away." I swallowed hard, my throat burning. My voice cracked, and I had to stop for a second. "I thought I was doing the right thing." Ryan squeezed my hand. "You were, but they stopped seeing it as help. They saw it as something they deserved." The weight of his words settled deep in my chest. I had spent years justifying the money, telling myself I was making their lives easier, that I was being a good daughter, a good sister, that I was keeping my family together. But in reality, I was just funding their comfort, and the second I stopped, I wasn't their family anymore. I was an inconvenience. I leaned back against the couch, staring up at the ceiling. "So, what do I do now?" Ryan didn't hesitate. "You stop." I turned to him, confused. "What do you mean?" His expression was steady, unwavering. "I mean, you stop sending them money. Completely." The words hit me like a slap. "Stop completely?" I hesitated. Cutting it in half had been hard enough. Cutting them off entirely? Ryan must have seen the doubt in my face, because he sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "Lisa, listen to me. I know it's hard. I know you feel guilty. But do you really think this will ever stop if you keep giving in?" I thought about the way my mom had sighed dramatically at the dinner table, the way Chris had acted genuinely offended that I wasn't giving him money for a gaming PC, the way my dad had pointed his fork at me, as if I owed them something. And then I thought about my unborn daughter. Did I really want to keep draining myself to fund their lifestyle? To keep making myself small just to avoid feeling guilty? The answer was right there, clear as day. I let out a shaky breath, my heart pounding. "No, I don't." Ryan's expression softened. "Then it's time to let go." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I stared down at my hands, my fingers twisting together anxiously. Letting go felt like giving up. But maybe giving up was the only way I'd ever be free. I inhaled sharply and looked up at Ryan. "I need to tell them in person." His brows furrowed. "Lisa, I don't think I have to," I insisted. "They won't take it seriously unless I say it to their faces." Ryan studied me for a moment, then exhaled through his nose. "All right, but you're not going alone." I shook my head. "I need to." Ryan didn't like it, but he didn't argue. He just sighed and rubbed my back again. "Just promise me one thing." I turned to him, waiting. "Don't let them guilt you into changing your mind." I swallowed hard, then nodded. "I won't. At least, I hoped I wouldn't." The next day, I picked up my phone and dialed my mom's number. The moment she picked up, her voice was chipper, like Thanksgiving hadn't happened at all. "Lisa, oh good, you're calling. We were just looking at some Christmas deals." And I cut her off. "Mom, I need to come over. We need to talk." There was a pause. Then her tone shifted slightly. "Oh? About what?" I kept my voice steady. "I'll explain when I get there." Another pause. Then, finally, "All right, sweetheart. We'll see you soon." As I hung up, my stomach churned. I had no idea what kind of reaction I was about to face. But one thing was certain. By the end of the day, everything would change. I sat in my car outside my parents' apartment, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. This was it. I took a deep breath and tried to push the doubt out of my mind. No backing down. No guilt. I had made my decision. I stepped out of the car, smoothed my sweater over my stomach, and headed toward the front door. As soon as I rang the bell, I heard familiar voices from inside. "Chris, mute that game. Lisa's here." My mom's voice was light, almost cheerful, as if nothing had happened. The door swung open, and Sam greeted me with a half smile. "Hey, sis, come in." I hesitated for half a second before stepping inside. Everything looked the same: the cozy couch, the decorative pillows, the spotless kitchen counter. It felt too normal, considering what had gone down on Thanksgiving. I glanced toward the living room, where my dad muted the football game and sat forward. Mom was already pulling out a chair at the dining table, patting the seat next to her. Like this was just another family gathering. Chris strolled in from the hallway, looking up from his phone for a brief second, before plopping onto the couch. I clenched my jaw. They weren't taking this seriously. That was about to change. I didn't sit down. Instead, I stood near the table, my arms crossed. "I'm here because we need to talk." My mom gave a small laugh. "Oh, Lisa, we know. But first, I wanted to show you some Christmas deals we found. There's this." "Mom, stop." My voice came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. She blinked. I took a deep breath. I've been doing a lot of thinking. After what happened on Thanksgiving, the first realized something. This arrangement we have, it can't continue. The air shifted instantly. My dad's face darkened. My mom sat up straighter. Chris actually put his phone down. "What are you saying?" my dad asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. I met his gaze. "I'm saying that as of today, I'm done. No more money, no more support. It's over." For a few seconds, there was only silence. Then, chaos. "What do you mean done?" my mom gasped, her eyes wide. "Lisa, you can't just cut us off," my dad snapped. "You've been helping for years. What are we supposed to do?" Chris let out an exasperated huff. "Wow. So, you're just leaving us to fend for ourselves? Cool, real cool." I refused to waver. "You've had 3 years to adjust. Instead, you've gotten comfortable. It's not my job to support you." Chris threw up his hands. "Are you serious? Do you even know what kind of stress we're under?" I scoffed. "Stress? You sit on that couch all day playing video games while I work my ass off. You want a new PC? A new car? Then get a job." Sam, who had been quiet until now, crossed her arms. "It's not that easy, Lisa. You don't get it." I turned to her. "Oh, I do get it. You and Chris are adults. Plenty of people your age work while they study. Plenty of families get by without a daughter paying their rent." Mom shook her head, looking heartbroken. "We never forced you to help, sweetheart. You offered. And now, you're just abandoning us?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I didn't offer so you could depend on me forever. I offered because I thought I was helping, but I see now that I wasn't. I was just enabling you," Chris scoffed. "Wow, you sound just like him." I narrowed my eyes. "Like who?" My dad leaned forward, his voice low and cold. "Ryan, your husband. This has his fingerprints all over it, doesn't it?" I blinked. "What?" My mom's expression twisted. "Ever since you married him, you've changed. He's been whispering in your ear, hasn't he? Filling your head with ideas about cutting us off?" I felt my pulse spike. They were blaming Ryan. Like this wasn't my decision. Like I couldn't possibly think for myself. I let out a sharp laugh. "You really think Ryan is the problem here? You are the problem. You used me. And when I finally say no, you turn me into the villain." Sam rolled her eyes. "Ugh, you're so dramatic." Chris crossed his arms. "I bet Ryan is loving this. Turning you against your own family." I clenched my fists. "He didn't turn me against you. You did. That was the final straw." My dad stood up, pointing a finger at me. "If you leave here today and cut us off, don't bother coming back." The words hit harder than I expected. For a brief second, I hesitated. Then I took a deep breath, lifted my chin, and met his glare head on. The only thing I regret is not doing this sooner. And with that, I turned on my heel and walked out. The moment the door slammed behind me, my phone lit up with messages. "Mom, Lisa, we've always been there for you. And this is how you treat us? Chris, guess I'll just go live in my car. Thanks a lot, sis. Dad, don't think for a second you can come crawling back after what you did today." I squeezed my eyes shut, exhaling slowly. They weren't sad because they lost me. They were mad because they lost their free ride. When I got home, Ryan was waiting on the couch. The second he saw my face, he opened his arms. Without thinking, I walked straight into them, letting out a shaky breath as he held me tight. "It's done," I whispered. Ryan pulled back just enough to meet my eyes. "Are you okay?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Not yet." He pressed a kiss to my forehead. "You will be." I hoped he was right, because for the first time in years, I was finally free. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, my dad's voice echoed in my head. "If you leave here today and cut us off, don't bother coming back." The words sat heavy in my chest, and no matter how many times I reminded myself that I had done the right thing, I couldn't shake the guilt entirely. Ryan had held me until I finally fell into a restless sleep. But when I woke up the next morning, my phone was already blowing up. I groggily reached for it, blinking at the sheer number of notifications. Mom, I hope you're happy. My blood pressure is through the roof because of all this stress. Chris, so I guess I don't matter to you at all. Good to know. Dad, you've broken this family apart. If we lose the apartment, it'll be your fault. And then I opened Facebook. The second I did, my stomach dropped. Right there, for everyone to see, was a long, dramatic post from my mom. I never thought I'd see the day when my own daughter would abandon her family. After everything we've done for her, she chose money over love. Some people forget where they come from. My heart is broken. I stared at the post, my blood running cold. The comments section was filled with messages of support, not for me, but for her. Oh my gosh, Evelyn, I'm so sorry. I can't believe Lisa would do that to you. That's disgusting. Family should always come first. She makes all that money, and she can't even help her parents? Wow. My hands trembled as I scrolled. Even extended family aunts, cousins, people I hadn't seen in years were chiming in, calling me selfish, ungrateful, heartless. Then I saw the worst one. Chris had posted a picture of an empty fridge. The caption, "Guess family ain't what it used to be. Thanks for leaving us to starve, Lisa." I felt sick. My family wasn't just mad. They were turning people against me. A tight knot formed in my chest, anger and betrayal mixing into something almost unbearable. I was about to throw my phone across the room when Ryan walked in, his hair still messy from sleep. He took one look at me and frowned. What happened? I handed him my phone without a word. As he read through the posts, his jaw clenched. Are you freaking kidding me? I let out a hollow laugh. Guess I'm the villain now. Ryan shook his head, disgust clear in his expression. Lisa, this is beyond manipulation. This is straight up character assassination. I leaned back against the couch, rubbing my temples. I don't know what to do. He sat beside me, eyes dark with frustration. Block them, I sighed. It's not that easy. If I block them, it'll just prove their point. Oh, look. Lisa doesn't even care enough to respond. Ryan exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. So what? You owe them nothing. Let them talk. I hesitated. Did I? I stared at my phone, at the hundreds of notifications piling up. Was I really going to let them paint me as the bad guy? And then, just as I was about to put my phone down, it rang. I froze when I saw the name on the screen. Aunt Linda. I hadn't spoken to her in years. My mom's older sister, the black sheep of the family. She had always been the one who spoke her mind, which, of course, made her the villain in my parents' eyes. I hesitated for only a second before answering. Lisa, her voice came through, sharp and direct. I saw the circus your family is putting on. I swallowed. Yeah, it's a lot. Linda let out a dry laugh. Let me guess. Your mom's making herself the victim. Your dad's playing the martyr. And Chris is acting like he's been abandoned on the streets. A startled laugh escaped me. That's exactly what's happening. Lisa, her voice softened, losing some of its usual edge. I need you to listen to me. This isn't new. Your parents have always been like this. They use guilt like a weapon. It's how they control people. I felt a lump form in my throat. I never thought they'd turn on me like this. Of course they did, she said simply. Because you stopped playing your role. I frowned. My role? The provider. The responsible one. The one who fixes everything. You were useful to them, Lisa. The second you stopped being useful, they threw you away. I sucked in a sharp breath. I knew she was right. She sighed. Look, I've been where you are. I spent years trying to earn their approval, trying to help, and when I finally said enough, they turned on me too. I blinked. They did? Oh yeah. The moment I stopped lending them money, I became the selfish sister who abandoned her family. Sound familiar? I let out a bitter laugh. Too familiar. Linda was quiet for a moment, then said something that hit me like a ton of bricks. Lisa, you are not responsible for them. I felt my breath hitch. Read that again if you have to, she continued. You are not responsible for them. They are adults. They made their choices. You are not their safety net. You are not their personal bank. And if you give in now, if you send them even a single dollar, it will never stop. I closed my eyes, letting her words settle deep in my bones. She was right. I had spent years pouring my time, energy, and money into my family, and they had never once appreciated it. The moment I stopped, they turned on me. I took a deep breath. So what do I do? Linda's voice was firm. You do nothing. Let them deal with the mess they created. And if they keep harassing you? I hesitated. Yeah, block them. Every single one of them. A wave of something unexpected washed over me. Relief. For the first time since this all started, I felt like I could breathe. I glanced over at Ryan, who was watching me carefully. You okay? He asked softly. I nodded slowly. Yeah, and for the first time in years, I actually meant it. For the next few weeks, I did exactly what Aunt Linda told me to do. Nothing. I didn't respond to my mom's guilt-tripping messages. I ignored Chris's dramatic posts about being abandoned. I even let my dad's passive-aggressive emails sit unread. And, just like Linda predicted, the storm didn't last forever. At first, the messages were constant. The anger, the guilt, the emotional blackmail. But when they realized I wasn't budging, things started to change. My mom's texts shifted from outrage to desperation. Mom, Lisa, I just came back from the doctor. My blood pressure is dangerously high. The stress of all this is making me sick. I hope you're happy. Then, a few days later, Mom, we may not even be able to afford my medicine. Please, can we just talk? I felt that familiar sting of guilt, but I heard Linda's voice in my head. They will push every button they can to get you back in line. I took a deep breath and did something I never thought I'd have the strength to do. I called my mom. She answered on the first ring. Lisa. Her voice was soft, almost fragile, as if she'd been waiting by the phone. Thank you for calling, sweetheart. I've been so worried about you. I clenched my jaw. Mom, I'm going to say this once, and I need you to listen. Silence. I'm not sending any more money. The shift in her tone was instant. Lisa, you don't understand what you're doing to this family. Her voice shook, the desperation creeping back in. You're tearing us apart. I swallowed the lump in my throat. No, Mom. I spent years holding us together, and you let me. You let me drain myself financially and emotionally. And when I finally said no, you turned on me. She sniffled dramatically. How could you say that? We're your family. Then act like it. My voice was steady, surprising even me, because right now, you're treating me like a bank, and I'm done. There was a long pause, then a sharp exhale, and just like that, the tears disappeared. Her voice hardened. Fine. If you want to leave your family behind, go ahead. But don't come crying to us when you realize what a mistake you've made. A coldness settled in my chest. I won't. And for the first time in my life, I meant it. I hung up. And just like that, it was over. The first few weeks were strange. For the first time in years, I wasn't constantly checking my phone for the latest demand from my parents. I wasn't worrying about whether Chris had enough money for some ridiculous luxury purchase. I wasn't bracing myself for another guilt trip. Instead, I focused on someone else, my daughter. A month later, Ella was born. The moment I held her in my arms, everything else, the stress, the guilt, the years of emotional manipulation became so insignificant. She was so tiny, so perfect. And as she curled against my chest, I made a promise to her right then and there. I will never make you feel like you owe me your life. Ryan sat beside me, pressing a gentle kiss to my forehead. She's perfect. I nodded, tears pricking my eyes. Yeah, she really is. And for the first time in forever, I felt free. A few weeks later, I got a call from Aunt Linda. Heard the good news, she said, warmth in her voice. How does it feel to be a mom? I let out a soft laugh. Amazing, terrifying, overwhelming, all of the above, Linda chuckled. Sounds about right. There was a pause. Then she said, and your parents? I exhaled. They stopped reaching out. Once they realized I wasn't giving in, they just moved on. Linda hummed knowingly. Of course they did. They lost their grip on you, Lisa. They had no choice. I swallowed hard. Do you think they'll ever try to come back? She was quiet for a moment. Maybe. But the question is, will you let them? I didn't answer right away. Would I? I thought about my mom's Facebook post, the way my dad tried to guilt trip me, the way Chris acted like I ruined his life instead of just getting a damn job. And then I thought about Ella. Would I ever let my family's toxic cycle touch her? No, I had broken free, and I would never go back. I smiled into the phone. No, Linda, I won't. She let out a proud laugh. That's my girl. And just like that, my new life began. A life where I was no longer trapped. A life where I put my family first. And this time, my family meant Ryan, Ella, and me. Story 2. My name is Rachel, and I'm 23 years old. I just graduated from college, and I have a story to tell you, one I never thought I'd have to share. It's about my house. Well, technically, it was my mother's house. until she passed away 4 years ago from pancreatic cancer and left it to me. Mom was always the planning type. Even before she got sick, she had everything in order. The house was fully paid off. She'd bought it years before she even met my dad. And thank God for that foresight, because after she passed, it meant I had one thing that was truly mine. She made sure I knew that too. "This way, you'll always have a home," she had said, her voice steady even as she fought the illness that was taking her from me. My parents' marriage had lasted 10 years before Dad left us for someone else. I was 9 when he packed his bags. No big fights, no screaming matches, he was just gone. There was no custody battle, no drawn-out legal fights over property. He only made one major contribution to my life. After that, he set up a college fund for me, paying for my education up front. That was his way of fulfilling his fatherly duties, I guess. After the divorce, he moved in with his new wife, Dana. She had their daughter, Emily, just a year later. Emily is 10 years younger than me, and while I visited sometimes, I never felt like I belonged. Dana was always preoccupied with Emily, fawning over her like she was the most special child in the world. Dad, on the other hand, was always working to provide for his new family. "Rachel, would you like to join us for dinner?" Dana would ask sometimes, but her tone always made it clear that she was hoping. I'd say no. It was all very civil, very polite, but also incredibly distant. I was never truly part of that household. We exchanged birthday cards, sent Christmas greetings, and had the occasional stiff dinner together. That was the extent of our relationship. Meanwhile, Mom worked hard as a senior accountant. She made good money, and when she was diagnosed with cancer, she used her savings to focus entirely on treatment. I was 14 when we got the news. She fought for 4 years, never complaining, always making sure I would be okay. But cancer doesn't care about how much you plan. She passed away when I was 18, just weeks before I was supposed to leave for college. The grief was suffocating. I could barely function. And then, surprisingly, Dad stepped in. He, Dana, and Emily moved into my house, Mom's house, to help me through it. At the time, I was too numb to question it, too exhausted to say no. "We'll help you through this," Dad said, his arm around my shoulders. Dana nodded along, looking sympathetic, while Emily ran around exploring what was now my house. That summer, I was faced with a decision. College was starting in a few weeks, and I had no idea what to do with the house. I couldn't bring myself to sell it, but leaving it empty for 4 years didn't seem like a smart option either. That's when Dad made his proposal. One morning, over breakfast, he casually suggested, "What if we stayed here? We'll pay the bills, maintain the place, and that way, you won't have to worry about anything while you're at school." I looked at Dana, who was flipping pancakes at the stove. She turned around and smiled. "It would be good for all of us," she added. "Emily's already enrolled in the local school, and the house would be well taken care of." It made sense. They had been staying with me all summer, and things had been surprisingly okay. Dana had stopped being so distant, and Emily had started treating me like a real sister. So, I agreed. Looking back, I was too trusting, too naive. Before I left for college, I packed up Mom's personal belongings, keeping what I wanted, and storing the rest in the attic. I felt good about my decision, knowing the house wouldn't be empty. For the next 4 years, I came home during holidays and summer breaks. The visits were nice, actually, better than I expected. Dana cooked these big welcome home dinners. "I made your favorite, chicken parmesan," she'd say, as if she'd always known my favorite foods. Emily would drag me to her room to show me her latest drawings, or tell me about school drama. During Christmas, we decorated the tree together, and Dad would lift Emily so she could put the star on top. Dana and I would argue good-naturedly over decorations, whether tinsel was tacky or timeless. Summer visits were even more relaxed. Emily and I spent afternoons at the pool, and Dana invited me to her book club, where we dissected romance novels over glasses of wine. "Your sister is so good with Emily," I overheard Dana tell Dad once. "It's nice having her home." That made me feel warm inside, like maybe we really had become a family. I called them regularly. During the semester's weekly chats with Dad about my classes, house updates from Dana. "The roses you planted are blooming beautifully, Rachel." And FaceTime calls with Emily, who kept me updated on middle school life. Everything seemed perfect. We had created this strange but functional family dynamic, built on the foundation of my mother's house. I never imagined it could all fall apart so quickly. But that's the thing about houses. No matter how solid the foundation, you never really know what's happening behind the walls. When I graduated, I had a job lined up back home, a financial analyst position at a firm downtown. It was a dream job, and I was excited to start this new chapter. I arrived home on a bright June afternoon. As the taxi pulled up in front of my house, I took in the familiar sight. The rose bushes were in full bloom, though they looked different from how Mom used to keep them. The lawn was neatly trimmed, and new curtains hung in the windows. Small changes, nothing drastic, but noticeable. I wheeled my suitcases up the front path and reached for my key, smiling at the thought of sleeping in my own bed again. But when I tried to unlock the door, the key wouldn't turn. I frowned. Maybe I was just tired from the trip. I tried again. No luck. My stomach tightened. Something was wrong. I knocked loudly. It was the middle of the day they had to be home. After a moment, the door opened, and Dana stood there, wearing an apron with flour on her hands, like she'd been baking. She blinked in surprise. "Rachel, what are you doing here?" I rolled my suitcase inside, glancing around. Dad and Emily were in the living room. Emily was sprawled on the couch with her phone, and Dad sat in his usual chair, Mom's old chair, reading something on his tablet. They both looked equally startled to see me. "What do you mean? I live here." My voice was calm, but my pulse was racing. I looked around. The furniture was rearranged. Little details, throw pillows, picture frames had changed. It felt off. "Why were the locks changed?" I asked, my voice sharper now. Dad shifted uncomfortably, rubbing the back of his neck, a nervous habit he'd always had. "Oh, that. Yeah. I changed them last month for security reasons. There were some break-ins in the neighborhood." I stared at him. "You could have told me, or sent me a new key." Dana crossed her arms, her smile strained. "We weren't expecting you." A cold feeling settled in my gut. "Why not? I graduated last week. I told you I was coming home." The uneasy silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. I followed Dad into the office, Mom's old office, technically mine now. It still had her framed degrees on the wall, her collection of financial books neatly arranged on the shelves. It was the one room that felt untouched, familiar. Dad shut the door behind us and let out a heavy sigh, rubbing his hands together like he was trying to warm them up. "Listen, Rachel," he started, his voice low. "There's something you need to know." I crossed my arms, already feeling a sick twist in my stomach. "What's going on?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Dana, she thinks this house belongs to me." I blinked. "What?" He swallowed hard. I told her it was mine. That after the divorce, I gave it to your mother and you out of kindness. And that when your mom passed, it reverted back to me. My brain struggled to catch up with what he was saying. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, the part where he'd laugh and say, "Just kidding. Of course, we know it's yours." But he wasn't joking. "So, you lied." My voice came out flat. Dad let out another sigh, running a hand through his graying hair. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't want to complicate things when we moved in. I thought maybe, eventually, you wouldn't mind sharing the house with us, that we could all be a family." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Right. A family where I pay for everything, and you guys just live here like it's yours?" "That's not what I meant," he said quickly. "Then what exactly did you mean?" My voice was sharper now. "Because from where I'm standing, it sure looks like you planned to keep this lie going forever." Dad rubbed his temple, looking exhausted. "Look, I just need some time. Give me a few weeks, and I'll figure out a way to tell Dana without—" I cut him off. "Without ruining your marriage?" His silence was answer enough. Unbelievable. I turned toward the door. "Rachel, please," he said, grabbing my arm. "Just a little more time. I promise. I'll fix this." I yanked my arm free, my hands shaking. "You should have thought about that before you lied to your wife for 4 years. I walked out of the office, barely holding it together. Dana was in the kitchen now, pouring herself a cup of coffee like she didn't have a care in the world. Emily was still on the couch, her legs curled up under her, scrolling through her phone. They had no idea what had just happened. I forced myself to breathe. I needed to think, to figure out what to do next. At dinner that night, the tension was thick enough to choke on. Dana kept sneaking glances at me across the table, her usual friendly tone replaced with something cooler, more distant. Emily, oblivious to the shift, chatted about her summer plans, completely unaware that her mother was looking at me like an unwanted house guest. Then, out of nowhere, Dana set her fork down and smiled, too sweet, too forced. "You know, Rachel, now that you have a job, have you thought about finding your own place?" There it was, the moment I had been dreading. I took a slow sip of water, keeping my expression neutral. "Actually, I plan to stay here. I already talked to Dad about it, and he's fine with it. Dana's smile barely faltered, but her grip on her wine glass tightened. Of course, dear, but wouldn't it be nice to have a place of your own? Somewhere new? Somewhere closer to work, maybe. This house is my home, I said evenly, and it's where I'm staying. Dana let out a soft chuckle, shaking her head like I was being difficult on purpose. Rachel, you're a grown woman now. It's time to start thinking about independence. Funny, I said, setting my fork down, because I was thinking the same thing about you. Her smile dropped. Dad cleared his throat. All right, let's not turn this into an argument. But the damage was already done. Dana was furious, even if she tried to hide it behind tight-lipped silence for the rest of dinner. From that night on, the atmosphere in the house shifted. Dana started acting like I didn't exist. She'd cook just enough food for 3 people. She rearranged the living room while I was out, moving Mom's things into storage without asking. If I was watching TV, she'd suddenly have to vacuum right in front of me. Emily followed her lead. My little half-sister, who had once looked up to me, now barely spoke to me. I'd hear her on FaceTime with her friends, referring to me as that girl. Dad? He did what he always did, nothing. He kept his head down, avoiding confrontation at all costs. I told myself I could deal with it, that as long as I had the house, I had the power. But then, one Saturday morning, I woke up to something that made my stomach drop. The house was quiet, too quiet. No Dana in the kitchen, no Emily blasting music, no Dad watching TV. I checked every room, my unease growing with each empty space. Then, finally, I called Dad's phone. It went straight to voicemail. Weird. I tried again. Same result. Something wasn't right. Finally, I called Dana. She picked up on the 4th ring, and before I could say anything, she let out a sharp, annoyed sigh. What do you want? In the background, I heard waves, music, laughter. Where is everyone? I asked. Dana laughed, but it wasn't a nice laugh. It was cruel. Oh, didn't we tell you? We're in the Bahamas. First-class flights, luxury resort, the whole deal. Figured we deserved a little vacation. My mind went blank for a second. You just left without telling me? Yeah, well, we didn't really feel like dealing with you. And frankly, we didn't want you tagging along expecting us to pay for you too. I gripped the phone tighter. Dana, this is my house, she scoffed. Your house? Don't make me laugh. You're a freeloader, Rachel. A grown woman living off of us like some kind of parasite. Your father might be too weak to tell you, but I'm not. When we get back, I want you gone. It was like a physical slap. Dana, no, I don't care where you go, but if you're still there when we return, I will throw you out myself. The line went dead. I sat there in stunned silence. Then, something shifted inside me. The anger came slow at first, creeping in like a low flame. But the more I thought about it, the hotter it burned. They thought they could kick me out of my own house. They had another thing coming. I stood up, my heart pounding, and grabbed my phone. First, I called a locksmith. Then, I started gathering their stuff. By Sunday morning, every single thing they owned was packed up. Dana's designer clothes, boxed. Emily's school supplies, stacked. Dad's golf clubs, tossed in the garage with the rest of their stuff. I wasn't just packing, I was erasing them. By noon, the locksmith arrived. Got a break-in problem? He asked, drilling out the locks. Something like that? I muttered. It cost a small fortune, but it was worth it. When the new locks clicked into place, I exhaled, finally feeling like the house was mine again. I pulled into the driveway after work on Friday and saw them standing there, suitcases in hand, faces tight with anger. Dana was the first to explode. Rachel, what the hell did you do? I took my time walking up the porch, changed the locks. You locked us out of our own house? She screeched. I tilted my head. Our house? You mean my house? She turned to Dad. Tell her she's lying. Tell her this is our house. Dad didn't say a word. Dana's expression cracked. She turned back to me, her voice sickly sweet. Rachel, honey, let's be reasonable. We'll pay rent. We can all live here together, like before. No, her smile vanished. You selfish brat, she snapped. After everything we've done for you? I let out a sharp laugh. Everything you've done for me? You mean trying to kick me out of my own home? Dana opened her mouth, but I cut her off. Your stuff is in the garage. Take it and go. Dana turned bright red, but before she could launch into another rant, Emily spoke up for the first time. Mom, let's just go, she mumbled. Dana spun on her. Excuse me? Emily shifted awkwardly. This isn't our house. For a second, Dana just stared. Then, with a bitter laugh, she stormed toward the garage. Dad gave me a long, tired look. I'm sorry, Rachel, for everything. I didn't answer. A few minutes later, they loaded the last of their stuff into the car and drove off. Just like that, they were gone. The house is mine again. I repainted the walls, planted new roses, took back every inch of space they had claimed. Dad tried calling at first, but I never picked up. Eventually, he stopped. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ashes. I'm doing better now. My job is great, and I've made real friends. And for the first time in a long, long time, I feel at peace.